In our modern world, conflicts can smolder for decades. Borders shift, alliances crumble, yet the lines drawn on maps often have histories far deeper than we imagine. Consider this. In 2023, the United Nations reported over 55 active armed conflicts around the globe, many rooted in disputes stretching back generations. But what if a conflict, one that would define the fate of a nation and echo through the ages, could be decided in less time than it takes to watch a television program? This is the story of the shortest war in recorded history, a conflict that lasted a mere 38 minutes. It took place on a sun-drenched island off the coast of East Africa, an island called Zanzibar. The year was 1896. Its capital, Stone Town, was a labyrinth of coral stone buildings, intricately carved wooden doors and bustling bazaars. The air here was thick with the scent of cloves. By the late 19th century, Zanzibar produced the vast majority of the world's supply of this precious spice. The Sultan of Zanzibar, who ruled from a magnificent palace overlooking the sea, controlled this trade. His authority gave him immense influence along the East African coast. The late 19th century witnessed a phenomenon known as the Scramble for Africa. European nations, driven by a potent cocktail of economic ambition, nationalistic pride, and a professed civilizing mission, raced to carve up the African continent among themselves. Two major players dominated this regional contest: Great Britain and Germany. Each saw East Africa as vital to their imperial ambitions. Britain, already a global naval power with extensive interests in India and the sea lanes of the Indian Ocean, saw German expansion as a direct threat. The British positioned themselves as advisors, as partners, as protectors. The Sultan of Zanzibar ruled, but he did so increasingly under the watchful eye of the British consul. The catalyst for the crisis came on the 25th of August, 1896. Sultan Hamad bin Tuwaini, the fifth Sultan of Zanzibar, died suddenly in his palace. Within hours of Sultan Hamad's death, his cousin, Khalid bin Bargash, acted decisively. With a force of loyal followers, he marched into the palace complex, occupied the main building, and declared himself the new sultan. This was a bold and direct move. Khalid was known to be far less sympathetic to British interests than his predecessor. He was a proud and ambitious man who believed Zanzibar should be free from foreign interference. He also had one significant asset, the HHS Glasgow. This was the Sultan's royal yacht, a vessel that had been gifted to a previous Sultan by Queen Victoria. Now armed with a Gatling gun and a few small cannons, it sat in the harbour, a symbol of Zanzibari sovereignty. Basil Cave did not waste any time. With telegraph cables humming beneath the Indian Ocean, he let his superiors in London know what was happening. The response from London was absolutely clear: Khalid must be removed. Out in the harbour, a pretty intimidating display of British naval power was coming together. 3 modern cruisers and 2 gunboats were soon at anchor, their guns aimed right at the Sultan's palace. On the afternoon of August 26th, Basil Cave issued his final ultimatum. Khalid was to lower his flag from the palace flagpole and leave the grounds by 9 o'clock the next morning. If he didn't, the Royal Navy would open fire. As the sun set over the Indian Ocean, a tense and sleepless night settled over Zanzibar. Khalid chose defiance. The decision was made. Now, the clock was ticking toward 9 o'clock in the morning. The morning of August 27th, 1896, dawned bright and clear. There was this nervous quiet hanging over Stone Town. At exactly 9 o'clock, the deadline passed. The Sultan's red flag still flew proudly from the palace flagpole. There was no sign of surrender. 2 minutes later, at 9:02, the order was given. The first shot was fired by the gunboat HMS Thrush. Right away, the other ships joined in. A deafening roar filled the air as the modern guns of the Royal Navy unleashed a storm of high-explosive shells. The palace, built of coral, stone and timber, just wasn't made to withstand this kind of assault. It started falling apart almost right away. The Sultan's armed yacht, the HHS Glasgow, bravely fired its small guns at the mighty HMS Philomel. The British cruiser fired back with its superior weapons, and within minutes, the Glasgow was a crippled, sinking wreck. Sultan Khalid, realizing his cause was lost, fled the palace through a back exit and found refuge in the nearby German consulate. At 9:40, with the palace in ruins and the Sultan's flag finally shot down, the firing stopped. The war was over, It had lasted just 38 minutes. The core reason for the war's incredible brevity lies in the vast technological chasm between the two sides. It was a confrontation that pitted the pinnacle of 19th-century industrial military power against a force that was, in essence, pre-industrial. The HMS Philomel was armed with 8 4.7-inch quick-firing guns. These weapons could hurl explosive shells weighing 45 pounds over several miles with remarkable accuracy. On the other side, the Zanzibari forces were a hastily assembled militia. While the Palace Guard had some formal training, many were civilian volunteers, loyal to Khalid but utterly unprepared for the terrifying reality of modern warfare. The fight between the Glasgow and the British cruisers was not a naval battle, it was target practice. Wood and brass stood no chance against steel and cordite. When the guns fell silent at 9:40 a.m., a stunned and eerie quiet settled over the Zanzibar waterfront. The magnificent palace, which had stood for generations as the symbol of the Sultan's power, was a smouldering, shattered ruin. It is estimated that around 500 of Sultan Khalid's defenders were killed or wounded in the brief, intense bombardment. They were buried in mass graves, their defiance erased as quickly as it had begun. On the very same afternoon, Hamud bin Mohammed was proclaimed the new Sultan of Zanzibar. His inauguration took place not with pomp and ceremony, but amidst the wreckage of his predecessor's ambition. One of his first acts, under pressure from the British, was to formally abolish the institution of slavery in Zanzibar once and for all. Zanzibar would now be ruled by a sultan in name only. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, despite its brevity, became a powerful symbol throughout the British Empire and beyond. For the British, it was a perfect illustration of their imperial doctrine. This event became a defining moment in the gunboat diplomacy era. The warships sitting in Zanzibar's harbour were more than military assets, they were diplomatic tools. For the people of East Africa, the war symbolized something entirely different. It was a brutal and humiliating reminder of their own powerlessness in the face of European industrial might. The destruction of the Sultan's palace was not just the destruction of a building, it was the shattering of a symbol of local sovereignty and pride. For Zanzibar, it marked the definitive end of its independence. This colonial arrangement would last for another 67 years until Zanzibar finally gained its independence in 1963. The struggles for genuine economic and political sovereignty that many African nations face today are deeply rooted in this history of subjugation, a history in which the shortest war serves as a chillingly clear chapter. Today, the world is different, but the echoes of gunboat diplomacy can still be heard. Economic leverage, technological dominance, and the threat of military intervention by powerful nations continue to shape international relations. The palace in Zanzibar has been rebuilt. It now stands as a museum, the House of Wonders. But the building is more than a museum. It is a monument. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, history's shortest, teaches us that the significance of a conflict is not measured in its duration, but in its consequences. It shows us how a few minutes of history can shape the destiny of a nation and leave behind a legacy that continues to influence our world. A quiet but persistent echo of a distant, thunderous morning.